So, back at last year, I made top 10 best Tom's Friends episodes list, and while it might be better than my original worst Tom's Friends episodes list, it still has its problems. For starters, I just used my phone to record some of the footages I needed for the video because I didn't know how to screen record around the time. The second problem I had with the video was my voice.
This is the top 10 best Thomas and Friends episodes.
Yeah, my voice didn't sound that good. And the third problem which I have with that video is that I never really gave that much of a reason on why I think these episodes were good. I just said, oh, they're great, and that was it. So I thought I should remake this list since I've already remade my worst Tom's Friends episodes list. So this is my top 10 best Tom's Friends episodes, the remake. The rules for this list, however, are going to be a lot more different. Episodes from season 1 to 7 of the classic era will be on this list only, which means episodes from the hit era, episodes from the Sharon Miller era, and episodes from the Big World Big Adventures era won't be on this list. Keep in mind though that these are only my opinions. Anyways, let's get started.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Ghost Train. In this episode, Percy has an accident and gets covered in lime, and he decides to prank Thomas for not believing the ghost story he told a few days ago, and Toby helps him out with the prank. I think what I like about this episode is mainly the dark atmosphere throughout the episode. I also think the fog is used really well here. I also thought George Carlin and Ringo Starr's narration in this episode is pretty good as well. And I also like Thomas's line near the end of the episode where he says, "Sorry, can't stop, gotta see a coach about a train." I don't know why, but I always found that funny. Overall though, I thought this was a pretty good season 2 episode, and I do recommend watching it. There's nothing else I have to say about this episode, so on to the next entry.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Busy going backwards. In this episode, Toad always wishes that he would go forwards instead of backwards. So one day when Oliver was taking some trucks up the hill, the trucks broke away, and now Toad became a runaway. I thought this episode was pretty good, and the music that was used for when Toad became a runaway was great. And I also like how it reused that same music again in Thomas and the Jet Engine, or Thomas the Jet Engine. I also like how this episode is mainly centered around Toad, since we don't really have that much episodes about him. This episode I thought was pretty cool, and both Michael Angelos and Alec Baldwin's narrations in the UK and the US versions of this episode was pretty good. There's nothing else I have to say about this episode, so on to the next one.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Gordon and Spencer. One thing Gordon doesn't have in the first 6 seasons of Tom's Friends and half of season 7 is he doesn't have a rival. And in my opinion, Spencer is the perfect character to be Gordon's rival. So in this episode, Spencer has to take the Duke and Duchess around Sodor, however he ends up running out of water on Gordon's hill. So Gordon has to help Spencer to arrive at the station. Again, I thought Gordon having a rival in this episode was really cool, and I also like Spencer in this episode as well. He's actually one of my favorite season 7 characters of Thomas and Friends. I also thought Michael Angelos' narration in this episode was pretty good, and the same thing goes with Brandon's narration as well in the US. So there's nothing else I have to say about this episode. Overall, it's one of my favorite season 7 episodes, and I do recommend watching it.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Break Band. I'll make this one quick since I don't have that much to say about it. So in this episode, Donald and Douglas have to deal with a spikeful brake van. However, Douglas ends up crushing it when he was helping James up the hill. Anyways, I thought this episode was pretty good. It's actually one of my favorite season 2 episodes. I like the spikeful brake van, and I also like Donald and Douglas in this episode as well. I just pretty much like everything in this episode. And I also like Donald Douglas' theme song at the beginning of the episode. I said I'll make this one quick, so let's just get on to the next one.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
So, what do I think of season 6 of Tom's Friends? It's not that good. I don't think it's bad, but it's not good either. Anyways, if I have to pick a favorite episode out of that season, it would easily have to be Thomas and the jet engine. So in this episode, Thomas has to collect the jet engine at the docks. However, when he collects it, Cranky ends up flipping the switch to start it, and now Thomas became a runaway. It wasn't until the jet engine ran out of fuel so Thomas can get back on his own speed again. I thought this episode was really great. I like how it reused the music from Busy Going Backwards. I like Birdie's reaction to when Thomas races past with the jet engine.
Want a race, Thomas? Beat Bertie? Never mind.
And I also like the design of the jet engine for this episode as well. Also, Michelangelo's narration in this episode is really great.
The driver tried to put on the brakes, but Thomas couldn't stop. Oh, boy!
Alec Baldwin does good too, however I didn't thought he was as good as Michelangelo's. Overall though, this is a really good season 6 episode.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Rusty and the Boulder. I'll make this one quick since I don't have that much to say about it. So in this episode, there's a big boulder on top of a mountain, and one day when a machine called Thumper was joined through the mountain, it ends up causing the boulder to fall and land onto the rails, and ends up chasing lots of engines, and it soon managed to make its way to the sheds, where Percy was there collecting some trucks. It ends up crashing into the sheds, which caused the sheds to explode, and eventually they decide to close the quarry and never bother with it again. So, here are the things which I like about this episode. I like Alec Baldwin's narration. It's actually one of my favorite narrations he did in the Tom's Friends episode. I like the explosion when the boulder crashes into the sheds, and I also like some of the settings in this episode as well. In my opinion, I thought Season 5 has some of the best settings ever. Anyways, I said I'll make this one quick, so let's just get on to the next one.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
The Flying Kipper. So in this episode, Henry has to take vans full of fish called the Flying Kipper. However, he ends up crashing into another train while he was taking the Flying Kipper. He then comes back from the works in a new shape, and that's pretty much the whole episode. So here are the things which I like about this episode. I thought the sets for this episode was really great. I like the snow as well. I like the theme for when Henry was taking the Flying Kipper. And I also like the crash as well. The crash in this episode is actually the first one ever in Thomas and Friends. And before you ask, no, I do not consider Thomas Tannerton's note to be the first crash in the show because Thomas just hits snow and still stays on the rails. This crash, however, is actually the first one to be shown on screen, and that's what I like about this episode as well. So, overall, this is easily my favorite Season 1 episode.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
All at sea. Like with Break Van, I'll make this one quick since I don't have that much to say about it. So the plot of this episode is that Duck always wanted to see things among the horizon, and that's it. So here are things which I like about this episode. I thought Michelangelo's narration in this episode was pretty good, as well as George Carlin's, and I also liked the ending as well. The ending is one of my favorite endings in the Thomas and Friends episode, because of how beautiful it was.
Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon. But he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes the best travels are those we can only dream about. Don't you?
Like what I said, I'll make this one quick since I don't have that much to say about it. Overall, though, this is a pretty good Season 3 episode.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
Toad stands by. So in this episode, the trucks are still teasing Oliver over the fact that he fell into the turntable well, so Toad decides to help Oliver to try and stop the trucks from lapping him. One day when Oliver was taking a train, he ends up ripping Scruffy apart. When Sir Tom Hack came to inspect some of the damages, it turns out Rusty had rotten wood and rusty frames, which is why he broke apart. And him and Oliver decided to keep it a secret and not tell the other trucks. And after that, the trucks never bother Oliver again. So I thought this episode was pretty good. I like the song Pop Goes to Ollie from the Trucks. I like Scruffy in this episode, and I also like Oliver's character development in this episode where he stops the trucks from laughing him, which is really cool. So there's nothing else I have to really say about this episode. On to number 1.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
I'm pretty sure you guys didn't expect it for this episode to be number 1. I mean, it was number 1 on my original list, and it's still number 1 here. That's right, my favorite Tom's Friends episode is still Escape. What else do I really have to say about this episode? Everything about it is just amazing, and there's not one single problem I have with this episode. So the plot is that Douglas takes a goods train to the other railway, and as he was going to go back to Sodor, he ends up seeing Oliver and Toad, and he decides to save them from Scrap. And so Sir Tom had decided to have them a part of Duck's branch line. Like what I said, everything about this episode is amazing. It's also one of my favorite Tom's Friends episodes from season 3 as well. I thought some of the sets for the other railway was great, Douglas was great, Oliver was great, Michelangelo's and George Clooney's narration is great. I like the theme for when Douglas saves Oliver and Toad from Scrap. I just like everything. So in my opinion, Escape is the best Tom's Friends episode ever. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. My next review, I'll be back to SML. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you in my next review.